As a person who grew up in a family where hating Muslims is a tradition, let's talk today about the England riots. First of all, these are not riots, these are not random, and this is not thuggery. It is an organized movement with a very clear rationale that doesn't come out of a vacuum. These people are our co-workers. These are our fellow bus riders, fellow shoppers at the supermarket. And these people have a very simple demand: leave England for the English. Hello and welcome. My name is William. I am a sociologist at the University of Warwick. And as usual, for these heated topics, you don't have to believe me or the evidence I provide within the description of this video. And if you believe that asylum seekers need to be burnt alive, well, welcome to this channel and feel free to comment and debate with people, because every single comment boosts the visibility of this video. I wanted to start with a question people ask me, is why do these people attack mosques even after it was revealed the murderer was not Muslim? Because it doesn't matter. Mosques are still part of the problem. So you may ask me, how does it even make sense? And this is where I tell you, it doesn't need to make sense as long as people abide by extrinsic values. Extrinsic values means that people rely on symbols, what things represent. People with intrinsic values, on the opposite, they rely on facts, evidence, and data. But people with extrinsic values, they rely on what these facts, data, and evidence represent. What do they mean? It is very simple. They say Muslims were never part of English history and they should leave too. So even if Muslims were perfect angels falling from the sky to solve all of Earth's problem, they still represent everything England stands against. So lots of people ask me, why do these people say save our babies but didn't say a thing when Lucy Letby was caught? Why did no one say a thing when Jake Davidson took the lives of 5 people in Plymouth? Why did no one say a thing when Joe Cox was murdered by Thomas Mayer? Let's put things very simply. Imagine that your sister, your brother, your uncle is a bit unstable and goes on a killing spree. What would you say? Well, you know, they're monsters, but they're still part of the family. And this is for you in and out group theory. These people were white, English, Thomas Mayer was Scottish, but in the end, people can identify somehow with them. Someone in the tribe did something wrong. They got caught, they got punished, let's carry on. It doesn't matter if the NHS didn't see coming and prevented Lucy Letby from doing more harm. It doesn't matter if the police allowed someone with mental disorders to handle firearms. These are not seen as problems of the system, structural problems, but as one-offs. But take Muslims, migrants, the Irish travelers, or worse, Muslim migrant Irish travelers. So these people are outside of the tribal identity. And the problem with the tribal part of our brains is that when we see an individual, even in isolation, by extension, our brains make them an ambassador for this abstract entity that is their tribe, which means that they are not worthy of trust, they are worthy of being suspect, and they are worthy of being fought against. And that's super simple for the tribal part of our brains to understand. It's only later in the evolution that our brains were able to do things like cooperate, build bridges and friendships across tribes. So I'm not saying that people leading these movements have some kind of reptilian brains, but it's more like, at a childhood stage, kids like to think in black and white terms because it's just easier for the brain to process. It's only later in life that they learn how to find nuance in complex matters. So of course, when people are stricken by grief, Do you think that they will be able to identify that, oh, the problems we're having is because of the government, it's because of the institutions, the global corporations or greedy landlords, it's because of them that English families cannot put food on the table? No, because these are very abstract, evanescent entities, just like clouds in the sky, not tribes, very different. It's much more complex for the brain to identify. And this is why, you would see lots of videos circulating on social media. For example, in July 2024, when the Roma gypsies rioted in Leeds, people who first commented, they say, oh, Muslims, Sadiq Khan's London. In 2021, Northern Ireland, when it was the loyalists, people were commenting, oh, these Muslims, deport them, stop the boats. No, these were loyalists. Which leads me to the subsequent question, why people are so obsessed with Muslims? For this, I invite you on a journey through time. But first, let's stop in 2009, when the EDL, English Defence League, was founded in Luton, lovely city. They were founded specifically to counter Islam and Muslims. You may ask then, what are their grounds? What are their reasons for hating Muslims and Islam? Is it because of grooming gangs? Is it because of terrorism? Is it because Muslims in England are poor and are all migrants? Two studies in 2015 and 2020 have found that the majority of grooming gangs were in fact white English people. Interpol, in their reports since 9/11, found that most terrorism acts in Europe were caused by nationalists, and this at least until 2019. And now if you read the censuses, most Muslims in Britain are born here and are increasingly getting educated and financially well off. So is it because the EDL are kind of Christians and they want to save the churches? Damn no, like 40% of Britain identifies as having no religion. And among the 20 or so percent of Christians, half of them say they're not practicing Christianity. All this to the point where I ask myself, is it even about Muslims in the end of the day? Because believe it or not, crime, poverty, violence existed in England way before the first Muslim set foot on this land. It seems crazy, but before World War II, most gangs were made up of local white English people. So if one was to remove all the Muslims, all the migrants, and this including Welsh, Scottish, and specifically Irish people from England, do you think that all these problems of violence and crime and poverty will disappear? Of course not. There will still be Lucy Letby's, Jack Davidson's, Thomas Mayer's, actually no, because he's Scottish, Peaky Blinders, because as long as the institutions of this country don't build a strong society and a strong economy that works for everyone, things will remain the same. So I see you coming. Why can't people realize that? And that's again, extrinsic values. The EDL might not be made of practicing Christians. I mean, they don't really live by, love thy neighbor part of the book kind of thing, do they? But I like to think of the EDL as some kind of church of nationalism. Just like many nationalist movements, it's a church that has its prophets, its myths, its books, its spirituality. And actually some researchers argue that all these ethno-nationalist movements are some kind of new religion, and the myths they rely on have been, it's a very long tradition, cultivated for centuries, since at least the times of the Crusades. And from that time in history, the facts that we know and read in books have over time been romanticized, simplified, essentialized to make England, this hero of Europe, defending continent against the barbarians, Islam and Muslims. And this is why the Knight Templar is the personification of England. Never mistake the Knight Templar for St. George's, who, God forbid, was Palestinian, so probably one of these Hamas supporters. Now let's skip a few centuries to the story of colonization, where Muslim lands, because I believe there is no such thing as Muslim or Islamic countries, it doesn't make sense, where these dangerous lands, which needed to be either occupied, controlled, or, like the French say, civilized. And at that time, not all Muslims were bad. Only those who were a bit too critical of the empire and who were a bit too religious, referring to the literature and the description. And this good and bad Muslim narrative has persisted until, the Iranian Revolution, 9/11, War on Terror. This narrative has cemented that Islam and Muslims is basically everything England stands against. Even nowadays, it doesn't matter if you're left, right and center, Labour, Conservative, Democrat, Republican, people still live by this good Muslim, bad Muslim dichotomy. It was revived after 9/11. They issued some official documents saying that which Muslims should the government collaborate with and which were the bad ones. So the good ones were basically those who were financially contributing a lot, the wealthy ones basically. Those who weren't too religious, drink a glass of alcohol here and there, and of course were able to support Israel. So if you happen to pray your 5 prayers and you happen to believe that Israel is violating human rights, you're not one of the good ones. It is a very effective mythology because also it amalgamates a lot of, Muslim, Islamic things all together, to the point where now people, the average person, thinks that Islam is what you find in Taliban control Afghanistan or in Saudi Arabia or ISIS, so people killing journalists, women not having any rights, and gay people thrown off buildings. Ironically, let me tell you this, if you've read any ethno-nationalist forum, you'll be very surprised about the amount of people who genuinely believe that throwing gay people out of buildings is a good idea, as well as, women shouldn't be allowed to govern, to vote, or be educated. In America, they call this white Sharia. They're proud of it. And you may ask, what's the proof, apart from the literature I just provided, that it's a colonial problem? Well, ask people, what is the ethnicity that has the most Muslims in the world? Most people don't know, for example, this very simple fact that most Muslims in the world are Indonesian. And if every single Indonesian was armed and funded by the oil money from the Gulf countries and backed by Iran and Pakistan, who have nuclear weapons, then, it's almost, I can't understand why didn't Muslims invade the whole world by now? What are they doing? Are they being lazy or what? And that's why countries like Poland, who have an established and officially recognized Muslim presence since the 14th century, still believe in narratives like the Great Replacement Theory or the Islamization of the world, while 7th century on, Poland's Muslim population is still of 0.1%. Extrinsic values. Figures have less power than symbols in myths. Which gets me to my second point. When it comes to figures like Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Kathy Hopkins, Nigel Farage, these guys are not patriots. These guys are not nationalists. They are not ideologists. They are PR experts and marketing experts, which is very different. They don't have a solution or a way forward. Just, the EDL is born out of being something against. It is not a movement for something. And many political analysts agree that it is not a politically sustainable movement. It cannot further down the line see itself as with members of parliament which are elected and being a political force in the government. Nigel Farage, if you know the story, even among nationalists, he's discredited because this guy is a puppet basically. He says what people want him to say. He has no idea, no real program. And you can already see that there is a huge difference between these guys and the likes of Nick Griffin, Mark Collett, who can argue, debate, converse for hours about their ideas and the rationale behind their ideas with people they completely disagree with. But all these fingers I have mentioned, if they were the foundations, ideological foundations of the movement, why are they not popular? Well, one of the big problems is that these ideologists are, let's say, a bit opposed to the occupation of Palestine by Israel. Some of them are actually openly anti-Semite, and they believe in things like Jews controlling the banks, the media, and so on. And many of them are opposed to the LGBTQ. While, the likes of Kathy Hopkins, Stefan Yaxley-Lennon, they are really proud of supporting Israel. However, it's not what makes them popular. These guys are just really good at saying what people want to hear. They are populists. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if they contradict themselves, their aim is not to make sense. Their aim is to mobilize people. And what happened in England is the result of this massive PR campaign. Even if, well, they're just empty vessels. Stefan, he flies out of the country at the first sign of trouble. It doesn't matter if Stefan is a coward, because he says great things that are easy to remember. And that's how extrinsic values work. And this is why one week people say that, oh, you should give the police guns, you should allow them to use violence. And the next, the same people would burn police vans and accuse the police of having a leftist bias. Question for you as a homework. Ask yourself, in these two different cases, what does the police represent? And then you'll be able to understand the situation. Now, we can use the same arguments they do against themselves. It's so vacuous. I can say that, the ideal is just being too liberal because they're too inclusive. They target anyone and everyone. They can't even agree on a single target. I can say that these guys, they are just leftists. They are weak leftists because they need to be in numbers to make some noise. A bunch of snowflakes who get triggered at the first sight of a person of color. So what's the solution? Because I got your emails, and a lot of people among friends and family are understandably worried. Everyone asks me, Will, why are you not getting worried? Well, I have a good excuse. I come from a country where people rip the hijab of Muslim women every other day, throw pig heads at mosques, desecrate cemeteries, and more and more. And that's on a regular basis. So from my experience, I can say, those things people do in the UK, they're really chilled compared to what's happening in France and has been happening in the past 24 years. These rioters in the UK, they're mommy's boys compared to French nationalists. So many people ask me, can these people change? Can the situation improve? Well, let me put this thing that way. In a modern society, people in general are not given the time and the tools, the intellectual tools, to sit and reflect and understand the situation. People literally have to survive. They are living paycheck to paycheck for some of them. And I want to illustrate this with an example that hits home, which is my mom. My dad has been having trouble with alcohol since I was 15, and since then he was long-term unemployed, and my mom had to be the sole breadwinner for the family. Until now, she's still working as a cashier in a supermarket, working 6 days a week from 9 to 9. My mom is a very simple person. If she sees someone charismatic saying things on TV and people like them for it, she believes them. She thinks that all these black people, the Arabs, the Muslims, they are all thieves. But at the same time, she would worry about the National Front saying to me and my sister, if they get in power, will be sent back to Poland. I always wonder, why couldn't she realize that the same things she was saying about black people and Muslims, these nationalist people were saying the exact same thing about her and my dad. And my mom is very well read. So it's hard to understand, how didn't she have the critical thinking to just pause for 1 second and think that these narratives are not for her benefit. These people who vehiculate these narratives, they have a very simple objective. We are their tools. We are their tools for them to gather power, to gather fame, votes, whatever. Once my mom was very passionate, but then with time she just stopped to care about this because she had priorities, her health, and still bringing an income to repay all the debts that my dad made because of his mistakes. But for us now, concerned citizens, the thing is, for me, who wasn't born in Britain, I have it, it's easy in my mind because Britain was never home. I've never considered Britain as a safe place. And I come from a country which is not really safe for anyone. And one thing I like to complain a lot, and sorry, I'm gonna be generalizing and offending, but one grievance I and my fellow European continental citizens is that, the problem with one of the problems with British culture is that people tend to beat around the bush. They tend to be double-faced. They smile to you, but then once you turn your back, they're going to say nasty things. And at least, a breath of fresh air is that these riots allow us to see, what people really think, what they really stand for or against, actually. So basically, finally, first time in my life, I'm able to draw a map of the UK, England, and say, okay, well, this place is not really good. No, I'm not gonna go there. No, not here, and so on and so on. It's so refreshing. And I've learned very early on that it doesn't matter whether one is like voting Conservative or Labour. It doesn't mean because either we share the same skin color, religion, or like political opinions, they're going to be my allies. It's not because you're white that you're safe. Just remember the story of Joe Cox. He just happened to have the wrong political opinions. So in the end of the day, this in and out group theory, they have shifting borders. Let's imagine for 1 second that all the Muslims, the migrants, and of course the Welsh, the Scottish and the Irish are gone from England. What are going to be their next target when they realize that you have English families who still cannot put food on the table? Who is it going to be? Are the landlords of London who have dozens and dozens of properties safe? Are the landowners who vote Conservative in the southeast are going to be safe? That's very simple. You just look back at history. So I've always been vigilant on the streets, whether I'm on my own or with friends or family, because, also I've worked for 4 years in private security, and I know that anything can happen anywhere. Also because I've studied social movements, and I know that these people who are serious about wanting to see asylum seekers burnt alive, they were always there, and they will always be. That makes me think, which group recently was serious about wanting to burn different people? Does it ring a bell? That's just crazy, They stand against Islam and Muslims, but they get their ideas from this group of people who call themselves the Islamic State. So as a practical advice, stay safe. Avoid certain places, certain times, certain areas. And just like, in private security, what we've been doing is, rehearsing scenarios, imagining the worst case scenario and thinking, what are we going to do? It's just, first things when I enter a building, I ask myself, where are the emergency exits? Where can a fire happen? And if so, where are the fire extinguishing facilities, where are the first aid kits, and so on. So ask yourself the question, what would you do if yourself or people around you would be attacked by one or several individuals? Are you fit enough to sprint for a few moments and escape your attackants? Or if not, because you may have health problems or something else, everyone is different, no judgment here, are you able to have the assistance or the help you require to avoid or escape these situations? Are your self-defense skills up to date? And these are general rules. Like anywhere you go in the world, these are the same. Anything can happen. These protests/riots will die down, but these people will go back to normal lives and will be around us. But to finish on a hopeful note, they are around us, but around us are also many people who prioritize humanity over tribalism. And it is very, very likely that if you who is watching and maybe, a 5th generation British Muslim, it is very possible that your upstairs neighbor, Lisa from Ireland, is as worried as you are in that moment. And I wind people up about this British culture of individualism, not speaking to each other and stuff, but things were not always like that. If just after World War II, people were like that, trying to rebuild their families, their countries, their homes. And this wave of individualism and people staying in their corners, that's after Thatcher. And this narrative that, fame, money, and power can buy freedom. But the fact is, at heart, people still long for personal interactions, and especially in these times, people long for reassurance. So we may need to rethink how do we interact with the people around us, starting with our family members and our neighbors. Because it's just like gardening, you don't make something grow because you throw pesticide at it. You let it grow because you take care of the soil. And the same goes for society. A stronger society, a stronger country, is the one which is able and enables their citizens to have nurture. I'll end here. Thanks for watching, and again, take care of yourselves and each other.